everybody, welcome back to my channel. It's the Fluffy Curvy Princess, or as I'm also known as, Sarah, and today we're going to talk about all the books I read in September and October. Unfortunately for me, the first book I read in September was It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. And all jokes aside though, this book was not near as bad as I thought it was going to be. I did an entire video on it if you want to hear the full rant, but I thought the story, while containing its issues, was still an interesting read and had its positive points. It did have a lot of cringe in it, but I mean, just because it was cringe doesn't mean the entire book was trash. For those of you who do not know, It Ends With Us is about a girl named Lily Blossom Bloom. I feel like that alone tells you a lot of what you need to know about when it comes to cringe. Lily Blossom Bloom is living her life and having to move on from the passing of her dad, whom she has a complicated relationship with, when she meets Raoul Kincaid, who is interested in her. And they start off with a complicated relationship. And the relationship ends up going in a direction that I think a lot of people who know nothing about this book would not have expected. Spoiler alert as well as trigger warning, but he ends up being revealed to be a domestic abuser. Again, I think there were good things about this book, things I like that Colleen Hoover did, and some of it was written based off experience of her own parents, so it was coming from the heart. But there were still some major issues I felt like as well, which again you can hear about in my other video. Next up was the book Dad Scares Me, God Scares Me by Vera, LaRee. If you've kept up with this channel, you will know that I've been reading memoirs from women who are in different cults, and this is from the cult Church of the Firstborn, which is a cult I have been reading several books on. Specifically, it's a polygamist cult in Mexico. She is born much later than the other woman I've read about in the past, so she was able to offer an insight into what the cult was like after the leader had died. It was short, but I was surprised at the amount of spiritual reflection and growth that she talks about in the book, despite its length. It's in fact a lot deeper than several other memoirs I've read dealing with similar subjects. She shows her thought process over the years and how slowly, as little things happen or pieces of information are revealed, her way of thinking about things changes. And I really enjoyed that. I do wish it had been longer, but I mean, if she didn't have anything really to tell, I could see why it wasn't. Another thing I had a problem with was that there were a decent amount of grammar issues throughout the book. Overall, though, I do recommend it. Next up is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. This is one of the best books I've read in a long time, and dare I say, one of the best this year. It was such a perfect commentary on art, hypocrisy, corruption, redemption, or perhaps better said, the lack of redemption. This book is about a young man named Dorian Gray and how he wishes he would never age, but rather that an excellent painting his best friend made of him would age instead. And mysteriously, his wish, which is carelessly uttered, is granted, and the consequences are not what you might be expecting. This is not simply a book about vanity, though those are a few of the many themes this book covers. For something so short, it packed such a big punch. I also like how in the personal edition I read, some high school student or whatever had left a note that said, "Boring, but gets better." And I can assure you that I did not find this book boring at all, but it did get better as it went on. 4.5 out of 5. Definitely go and read it if you haven't already. I haven't heard any complaints about it, and I can see why. The next book I want to talk about is Ace of Spades by Faridah, Àbíké-íyímídé, and boy did I have mixed feelings about this book, which if you want a full rant on, check out my Dark Academia video. To start, Ace of Spades is about Devin Richards and Chiamaka Adebayo, two only black students at a very prestigious school. And though they're both successful in their own ways, someone is determined to ruin their lives. And they need to find out who before it's too late and their lives are officially over before they've even began. Long story short, I loved the mystery, I loved the characters and the pacing. I was on the edge of my seat while reading this. I do think though the themes could have been dealt with better, which the main theme of this was systematic racism found in academia. I just felt like the way it was dealt with, it was oversimplified, and I would dare to see even dumbed down a bit. Even though it's for a young adult audience, I don't think that's an excuse for it to not be explored as complexly. Her antagonists were extremely shallow, and one of them, when confronted with why they were racist, the literal answer they gave was, "Because I can." It was just a bit comically oversimplified. Like, yes, people are racist for no reason, and they are ridiculous, but no one is actually going to go around saying something that's stupid. And I wish I had been more subtle and realistic as systematic racism is in real life. Next we have The Polygamist Daughter by LeBaron. Again, if you've been following my cult, if you've been following my channel for a while, you know I've been reading memoirs on the Church of the Firstborn, the fundamentalist Mormon cult, and a rival church that I may have mentioned in a previous video, I'm not sure, this Church of the Lamb of God. I've been keeping the details to myself because I'm going to be making a video, Lord willing, very soon about the entire showdown that went on between these two churches, as well as the many memoirs I've read on it. Anyway, one of the most infamous people between these two cults, specifically in Church Lamb of God, was the leader LeBaron, who had at least 25 of his own cult members murdered in a desire to start the true church. This book was written by one of his many, many daughters. Again, I want to save the real meat of this book for the later video, but I will say it is worth reading. She definitely had a childhood unlike anything I've read about. And I have been reading books about boys and girls and cults for years. She talks about growing up basically providing slave labor for her father's right-hand man, constantly hiding from the FBI and fleeing in the middle of the night, as well as seeing her father, who was basically worshipped in their cult, and yet she only saw him 3 times in her entire life. I have much more to say in the other video, but for now, I think this will let you know just how interesting this book was. Next up we have Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. I was emotionally destroyed by this book. So thank you, Ishiguro. It was an honor. I won't say much about this book because everyone should have the chance to experience the story blindly, I feel like. This novel is about a young woman looking back on her childhood and teenage years and reflecting on it. And I think that's honestly all you really need to know about the plot. It deals a lot with the meaning of life and what it means to be a human being. And it was soul crushing. If you know, you know. I did not cry after reading this book, but I did lie in my bed and stare at the ceiling feeling hopeless despair afterward. And that's just a different kind of trauma. It's the rethink your entire life sad, not cry yourself to sleep sad. Next up we have Daughters of Zion by Kim Taylor. Once again, a book about the Church of the Firstborn cult. Kim Taylor offers a first-hand account of what it was like converting into the church as a child. Again, I'll save most of the details for my full reveal video, but it was a good read. Her family was not as involved in the church as some of the other families were. That does not mean it lacked in insight or stories. She has her own specific experiences both inside the cult and in the aftermath of leaving. I actually was also recently reading, though this is not in my October or September video, Sound of Gravel, which is written by her niece, Ruth Warner. Kim mentions her in her book, and so reading about similar events from 2 different perspectives is really interesting. And now, since it was October, I wanted to read some horror, so I tortured myself by reading Tender is the Flesh by Agustina Bazterrica. For the longest time, I was sure I would never read this book. I hate cannibalism. It is just so disgusting to me. I'm just not a cannibal girly. I was not a let's read Bones and All girl. But it was only $2.99 on Kindle, and I'm like, why not traumatize myself? And I was traumatized. There were a few times reading this where I felt physically nauseous, and I was like, that is disgusting. Tender is the Flesh is a dystopian novel where a disease has supposedly infected all animals on Earth. Therefore, humans cannot eat or even use animal products like leather or milk. In order to fix this problem, the government creates a caste of humans to be regarded as special meat. These come from people who are poor, criminals, or just simply unwanted by society. The humans are treated like cows and also extremely dehumanized so that they can be eaten and used the way we would use an animal. It is so disturbing, but I cannot deny that it had serious literary merit. Like, I know I'm going to sound like I'm just something crazy, and I do not like these kinds of books, but I'm serious. It was dark and disturbing, like 1984 is, and you feel hopeless reading this, but there was still a genuine purpose to it. It was not just senseless gore or shock, I feel like. Well, I think it's easy to just say, this book is about veganism or capitalism. I think the book has a lot more to say than that. It shows the downfall of a society and how easy it is for us to dehumanize each other. While reading this, I thought of people throughout history who were sent to concentration camps or who were enslaved. Even now, there are groups of people in the world that come to my mind, and they are treated as less than human because they are a minority in that country, and they are sent to camps or murdered. The way that humans during these times just go with it and even help with it, because it's just easier to do that than to fight against the system. Or as one person on Goodreads put it, even being mildly inconvenienced is too much to do anything about it. And it's just so true. In Germany in World War II, the average citizen was helping with the executions of the millions of people, or at the very least knew about it and was pretty much unbothered because these people have been dehumanized. And it makes me think of that saying, The Banality of Evil, by the Jewish woman Hannah Arendt. So again, disgusting book, but I think there was some genuine literary merit that she was able to express in the way she wrote it and the way she developed the story. The only thing I hated about this book was the ending. I think it brought its 4 rating down to a 3 because that ending made no sense. And again, if you know, you know. and he was not foreshadowed, and there were no events or conversations that made it a logical conclusion to the story. I think completely contradicts the character arc that Marcos, the main character, goes on. I'm not going to spoil it, but most people I've heard talk about this book have also hated this ending. And the last book I read in October was American Predator by Maureen Callahan. Again, I want to traumatize myself because it's Halloween, and if I'm not being traumatized, why am I even alive? This book was terrifying because everything in it was real, and it was OMG terrifying. This is a nonfiction book recounting the events of the capture and confessions of the serial murderer Israel Keyes, and it was chilling. Chilling! This man is shown to have murdered numerous people and was able to get away with it for so long despite not even having gone to school. He was able to build his own weapons, was familiar enough with construction to know how to break into buildings, and apparently pretty much never left any traces at any of his crimes. There was even a crime he confessed to and told them where he left the bodies, and while everything else was found, the bodies have not been found to this day because he just dealt with the situation so well. For more than a decade, he was doing this stuff all over the US and traveled to more than a dozen states, including one that I live in, and was burying bodies in kill kits. It is legitimately so terrifying, especially when you wonder how many other people are out there that have done this kind of stuff, and the police just have not caught them yet, because we as humans are limited and we can't know everything all the time. So yeah, Tender in the Flesh was gross, but this was truly scary, because this was completely real. Do I recommend you read it or not? Whether you want to read it or not, I mean, you gotta think about that, because it depends on how much you want to be traumatized. Part of it also makes me sad, because there are so many families, as the detectives were talking about in the book, who will probably never have any closure or peace, because the murderer ended their own life, and we're probably never going to know all the people that he murdered. So there's going to be victims out there who are never found, and their families will never really know what happened to them. And that's just really sad. And again, the fact that so many people in the US go missing permanently makes me wonder how many people are doing similar things around us. I mean, these are all the books I read in September and October. It is now November, and I've been finishing up some of my books actually left over from October, including some horror. I actually really want to make that video soon about the Church the Firstborn cult and their rival cult, Church Lamb of God. It is truly one of the wackest cults I've read about, I think, recently. So stay tuned. As always, thank you for checking out my channel. Have a great day. Bye!